Very special hello to everyone down in Guyana, especially those of us, those of you who are friends of ours. We especially appreciate you viewing into teaching the truth in love. And if you're not a friend, don't remember us being in Guyana. We're glad that you've joined us and you're going to be a part of this study with us. We're studying from the book of Luke, chapter 15, and we've entitled the lessons Seeing the World Through the Eyes of Jesus. Jesus, talked to the people of his day, and the setting for Luke 15 is when the Pharisees and the tax collectors and they came together and they criticized Jesus for being associated with sinners. And so Jesus is going to tell them a parable in three stages. He'll talk to them about the lost sheep. He'll talk to them about the lost coin. And then he'll talk to him about the lost boy and his brother. And these are important lessons because they teach us a lot about Jesus and how he sees people today, how he sees you, how he sees me, what he thinks of us, and what he's doing for us. He's interested in us. When we looked at the first part of the parable, the lost sheep, we noticed several different things. One, we noticed that sheep basically are dumb. You don't see any trained sheep in circuses or, in carnivals. They basically are just there to do whatever it is that they do. And we noticed also that sheep are very dependent. They need a shepherd. They can't do for themselves. And so they need a shepherd to guide them and to provide for them. They will eat the grass as long as they can find it. But the shepherd's got to find the pasture for them. And Jesus is saying that, he and the Father are, the pastors, the shepherds that are going to show them, the way that God wants them to go. And then we saw in the next section the lostness of the coin. And again, we see, the extent that this woman went to in order to find that lost coin. It was meaningful to her. We used the illustration of the bando that those that were engaged were given. A woman was given this bando, had 10 silver stones on it, and she wore it around her head. And if one of them was missing, it was because her fiance considered it to be unfaithful and had removed the coin. So here was this woman, and she certainly was not unfaithful, and she didn't want to present, the idea of unfaithfulness. And so she, lit the house, swept the room, did everything she could in order to find that lost coin. It was lost in darkness, it was lost in dirtiness, and it was lost in disgrace. Now that brings us to the third part of the parable. It's one parable with three illustrations in it. The lost sheep, the lost coin, and now the lost boy and his brother. And this is the summation of Luke 15 and the summation of what Jesus wants to teach us about how we're lost and how we're found. And we're looking at the first part of these illustrations. We're looking at the lost nature of mankind. And we see that they, are lost in a lot of different ways. Now, when we come to this lost boy, we see that he was lost in decline. He really had fallen from the grace of his father. Let's read these verses, verse 11 through verse 21. Jesus continued, there was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. This is between him and his older brother. Not long after that, the younger son got together all of his that he had, and he set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a famine, severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I'll set out and I'll go back to my father, and I'll say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men. So he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him. And he was filled with compassion for him. And he ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and he kissed him. The son said to the father, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to the servant, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. But that's a great story and tells a lot, about God. And we'll get to that part of the lesson when we talk about, the saving nature of God. Right now, we want to talk about, this young man and his decline. He went to his father and he said, Father, in essence, he said, I wish you were dead because I want my inheritance. Now, my wife and I have had a couple of inheritances, and it was always, when someone had passed away. Her foster brother, passed away and left us an inheritance. It came as a big surprise to us because we never expected anything like that. But when we receive an inheritance, it's usually at the death of the one who has the substance to give. And so this young man was in essence saying, Father, I wish you were dead so I could get my inheritance. Now, this shows just how far this young man had declined, how far he had fallen. We don't know what made him to do this, have no idea why he felt this way. But we further see his decline when he gets into the far country. It says that, he was misled, by his friends. It shows just how far this young man had fallen. He had gotten away from the influence of his family, of his father, and, he just kept in decline, kept going down. It says he, squandered his living, his inheritance in wild living. Now, his brother is going to say that he lost this with prostitution, which, is a way that many are being deceived today and are lost. Don't be misled. Bad company is going to cause us to decline. Pick your friends wisely, because if you don't, you'll be like this young man. These friends deserted this young man when his money was all gone. They were only interested in what they could get out of him. And that's the way it is with a lot of people, a lot of, sinful people. They're only interested in what they can get out of us. And we have to be very careful as we, select these friends. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33 says, be careful choosing your friends. Wrong ones can lead you astray. That's what making bad choices do for us. I'm very fortunate. I've been preaching well over 50 years, and most of my associates are members of the church, good people, people that want the best for me. These are good friends. Don't be misled. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, bad company corrupts good character. And it does. It's amazing how, we can end up spending everything we have because of bad companions and people who are just interested in what they can get out of us. And, once our money's gone, they're also going to be gone. That is, these so called friends are going to be gone. Eventually, this young man found himself with a job feeding pigs. Now, this shows, a further decline of this young man. No Jewish boy would ever be caught feeding swine. And yet, this young man, that's the only job he could find. And he was so desperate that he would eat the pods that the pigs were eating because he was hungry. He had spent all he had nothing left, and he was willing to do anything to preserve his life. Now, we see that he was also lost in depression. And this is seen from the fact that, he employed himself with someone who wanted him to feed the pigs. And as I said, this is, the ultimate decline. Sin is very costly. Satan makes it sound good, makes it look good, but, he never delivers on his promises. You never hear anyone say, well, I do what I do because Jesus let me down. Jesus hasn't ever let anyone down. He doesn't always promise us the best of everything, but he's always there for us, and he'll always be there for us. Sin will cost you your health. It'll cost you your family. It'll cost you your wealth. It'll cost you your home. And ultimately, it'll cost you your eternal home in heaven. Sin's a very costly thing. And this young man found that out. And there's many today in our society that thinks they can just live any way they want to live and everything's going to be okay. They're going to be all right. But, how many have, lost everything because they've gotten caught up in sin? Folks, I don't want you to be caught up in sin. You know, someone might say, it's hard to be a Christian, but really it's not. We've got Jesus on our side. I'm better off today than I've ever been. But even in the times of difficulty, God didn't forsake me. Jesus didn't forsake me. They were always there. They were always providing for me. Jesus made the statement in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 to 30. Listen to what he says. He said, come unto me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, For I'm gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And this is the promise of God. This is how Jesus, saw the people. He saw them as people who were weary and burdened. And he promises them he's going to give them rest. He wants them to have this rest. In Proverbs chapter 13, verse 15, it says, good judgment wins favor, but the way of the unfaithful leads to their destruction. Unforgiven sin can cause depression, bad depression. There are people today that get caught up in premarital sexual relationships thinking that's going to make them happy. It's not going to make you happy. There are those that, get caught up in sexual activity with another person after marriage, thinking that's going to make them happy. But it doesn't make you happy. You're living in sin, and sin is a burden, and sin's going to burden you down. You'll find yourself in a place of depression if you're not careful because of sin. But this young man also saw this as dissatisfaction. He was lost in dissatisfaction. He left for the far country with his pockets full of money. Great expectation. He was going to go and conquer the world. He had everything he thought he needed. But then he finds himself, in this place of dissatisfaction. And he thinks to himself, I'll just go home. I'll have my father make me as one of his hired servants because they have more than what I've got now. They have food and food left over. I'll just go and I'll be one of the servants. I won't be a son any longer. It's amazing that, sin is so disappointing. It promises a lot, but it gives a little. It says, you come and do this with me, and notice, how you're going to prosper. But you don't prosper. And even if you did, get ahead financially here in this life, you lose your eternal soul. And who wants to do that? This young man had been promised a lot, but sin delivered a little. He found himself in a far country, away from home, with his father's inheritance, and he says, I'll just go home. I'll go home and I'll be a servant. That's all I need. Sin promises happiness, but most of the time it gives misery. So we have to be extremely careful, when we find ourselves in a sinful situation. Let's read the last part of this parable. And this is the older brother. Notice what he said. I'm beginning in verse 25. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. So he began to talk, asking about, who is celebrating and who's doing all this dancing. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of his servants and he asked him, what's going on? Your brother's come home, he replied, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother, became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you, and you've never disobeyed. I've never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a small goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fatted calf for him. My son, the father said, you're always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is now alive again. He was lost and is now found. You know, the brother finds himself in the same situation that the younger brother was in. There was jealousy on his part, and we can't be saved, with jealousy. And this older brother, when he heard that all of this celebrating was going on, he wanted to know why, and he wanted to know, what he could do uh, to, change things. And then he tells his father, I've slaved for you all these years, and you've never even, killed a goat and celebrated with me and my friends. And yet your brother, who's your son, my brother, who has, lived in riotous living and squandered his money on prostitutes, you gladly kill the fatted calf and you have a celebration with him. It's a sad situation to be in when we become envious, of the success of other people. And we do. Uh, we live, our sanctimonious life, or we think we do, and we become envious when someone who has lived in sin, we know they've lived in sin, and yet they become faithful to God, and we become upset because of it. And it shouldn't be that way. We don't want to be like this older brother and resent, his younger brother and resent what his father has done to bring him home and to celebrate his coming home. They put, a robe on his shoulders. They put sandals on his feet. They put a ring on his finger, and they kill the fatted calf and celebrated with him and his friends that he was no longer lost, but that he has come home. It's a great, great story in Luke chapter 15. The lost sheep, the lost coin, and these two lost boys. Yeah, both of them were lost. The younger brother was lost because he was in a far country and squandered all of his money. The older brother was lost because he was jealous of the celebration that his younger brother was receiving when he came home and came out of sin. So we've got to be extremely careful, very careful that we don't do, the same thing. And it's easy. I know it is. And we don't want to find ourselves in this situation. Now, when we get together next time, we want to look at the saving nature of God. We'll go back and look at these parables, and we'll talk about the rescuing nature of God and the revealing nature of the Spirit and the receiving nature of God. All of this is going to be extremely important to us. We don't want to leave ourselves in the negative. We want to look at what God does in order to save us. You see, God reaches out from heaven to us. He wants us to be saved, and He'll do everything He can to help us reach salvation and to live eternally with Him in heaven. So I look forward to being with you the next time when we talk about this saving nature of God. This is the climax to the series from Luke chapter 15. I want to encourage you, if you have questions, be sure to call the people at Teaching the Truth in Love. They're more than happy to assist you any way they can in knowing the answer to any questions that you may have. Feel free to call them. They're ready and willing to answer your questions. Until the next time we get together, may the good God of heaven bless you and keep you.